I don't know what you think you're doing here, but this park isn't for people like you. Did you hear me? Pack up and go back to wherever you came from,
she said.
I'm just sitting here, ma'am. I'm not bothering anyone.
You know what? I'm calling the cops.
She stepped closer, phone already in her hand. As she dialed, a satisfied smile spread across her face. She had done this before, and it always ended exactly the way she expected. Marvin stared straight ahead. He didn't argue. Daniela had no idea that the officers she was calling were about to sit down beside him and turn their attention straight back to her. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The morning was the kind of beautiful that felt almost cruel. Blue sky, warm sun, the kind of late August day that made you forget, just for a moment, that the world could be ugly. Millbrook Park was quiet at this hour, a few joggers on the path, a young mother pushing a stroller, the distant sound of kids on the far playground, birds doing their thing in the oak trees overhead. Marvin Wenstorm sat on a wooden bench near the pavilion and drew. His sketchbook was open across his knees, its pages soft from use. His pencil moved in careful, deliberate strokes, tracing the roofline of the pavilion across the path, the way the overhang curved, the angle of the support beams, the small details most people walked past without ever noticing. One earbud in, music low, the world at a comfortable distance. He was wearing his blue hoodie, 2 sizes too big. His mother had bought it that way on purpose. "So you can grow into it," she'd said, folding it into his drawer like a promise. He was 18 years old. He had a full scholarship letter tucked inside this very sketchbook, a letter he hadn't shown anyone yet, hadn't even said out loud. He'd been carrying it around for 4 days like something fragile, afraid that speaking it into the world would somehow make it disappear. For right now, on this bench, in this park, on this perfect morning, Marvin Wenstorm was just drawing, just breathing, just existing. That was enough to be a problem. He didn't notice her at first. He was focused on the roofline, getting the curve right. But something made him look up, the way you feel eyes on you before you actually see them. A woman had stopped on the path maybe 30 feet away. Blonde hair pulled back tight. Red tank top. 2 golden retrievers on leashes, both sitting now, waiting. She was staring at him the way people stare at something they've decided doesn't belong. Marvin looked back down at his sketchbook. The woman didn't move. He could still feel it. That stare, like a finger pressing between his shoulder blades. Then she walked over. "Excuse me." Her voice was sharp and bright, the kind of voice used to being obeyed. "What exactly are you doing on this bench?" Marvin pulled out his earbud, slowly, carefully. He looked up at her with a neutral expression his mother had spent years helping him perfect. "Drawing," he said. She let out a short laugh, the kind that wasn't meant to be funny. "Drawing." She said it the way you'd repeat something a child told you that you didn't believe for 1 second. Her eyes moved slowly over his hoodie, his backpack, his face. "Taking inventory." "Right. And do you actually live anywhere near here? Or did you just wander in?" "It's a public park," Marvin said. She tilted her head, lips pressed thin, like he'd said something amusing. "I know what it is, sweetheart. I've lived here 11 years. That's not what I asked you." "No, ma'am. I don't live around here." The corner of her mouth pulled up. Not a smile. Something colder than that. "No, I didn't think so." She looked him up and down one more time, slow and deliberate, making absolutely sure he felt every second of it. "Then I think you'd be much more comfortable somewhere else, don't you? There are plenty of other parks." Marvin said nothing. He held her gaze for exactly 1 second, then looked back down at his sketchbook. His pencil found the page again. His hand was steady. He made sure of that. "I'm talking to you." Her voice dropped, quieter now, and somehow worse for it. "Don't do that. Don't sit there and ignore me like I'm the problem here." He didn't look up. She made a sharp, disgusted sound, like he was something she'd stepped in, and reached for her phone. She dialed without taking her eyes off him. Marvin heard every word. "Yes, I need to report someone. I'm in Millbrook Park, near the pavilion. There's a young man here, been sitting here loitering, acting very aggressive." A pause. "Dark hoodie, backpack, making me feel very unsafe. I have my dogs with me. I'm a woman alone, and I don't know what he's got in that bag." Her voice shifted, dropped to something rehearsed and careful, like she'd done this before. "He's black, teenager, maybe 18. He says he doesn't live in this area, so I have no idea why he's here." Marvin closed his sketchbook. He set his pencil on top of it. He placed both hands flat on his knees, fingers open, palms down, right where anyone approaching could see them clearly. His mother's voice was in his head, calm and firm, the way she'd said it 100 times since he was 7 years old. "Hands where they can see them. Don't reach for anything. Don't argue. Stay calm, Marvin. Stay calm, no matter what they do." He stared straight ahead at the pavilion he'd been drawing, the roofline he'd been getting just right. He breathed in through his nose and out through his mouth, slow and even, like none of this was happening, like his heart wasn't slamming against his ribs, like he wasn't furious, like he wasn't scared. 3 benches away, an old man in a gray jacket folded his newspaper with quiet, deliberate hands and watched everything. Daniela Harfield ended the call and turned back around. She wasn't done. That much was clear. She had her phone up now, not to her ear, but raised in front of her, camera facing Marvin. Recording. Her dogs had settled at her feet, bored and panting, completely unbothered. Their owner was a different story. She planted herself 12 feet away and waited. Marvin didn't move, didn't look up. He kept his hands flat on his knees and his eyes forward, fixed on the pavilion, like it was the most interesting thing in the world. Like she wasn't there. Like the camera wasn't there. Like none of this was happening to him on a beautiful Saturday morning when all he'd wanted to do was draw. "You know," she said, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear, "most people, when they're innocent, they don't just sit there like a statue. They talk to people. They explain themselves." Marvin said nothing. "Just something I've noticed." She shifted her weight, tilting her head. "Guilty conscience, maybe." A jogger slowed on the path behind her. A young woman with a ponytail, earbuds in, who caught the scene and pulled up short, eyes moving from Daniela to Marvin and back again. She didn't leave. She drifted to the edge of the path and stopped, pretending to stretch her calf. "Good," Marvin thought. "Let someone see this." "I'm going to need you to open that bag," Daniela said. Marvin looked up then, slow and steady. "No," he said. Her eyebrows shot up, like the word had physically surprised her. "Excuse me? You're not a police officer," Marvin said. "I don't have to show you anything." Her face went through something, surprise, then irritation, then a kind of bright, hard amusement, like she'd just decided to enjoy this. "Oh, okay, I see." She nodded slowly, lips pressed together. "You've got rights. That's what you're going to do. You're going to sit there and talk to me about your rights." She laughed, short and sharp. "That's rich, honey. That is really something." The jogger was still watching. An older man walking a beagle had stopped further up the path, the dog sniffing the grass, the man watching over its head, with a still, careful expression. "You're making this so much worse for yourself," Daniela said. Her voice had dropped again, back to that low instructional tone, like she was doing him a favor. The police are coming. They are on their way right now. And when they get here, and they see you sitting there refusing to cooperate, refusing to even have a simple conversation, how do you think that looks? How do you think that goes for you? Marvin held her gaze this time. He didn't look away. I haven't done anything wrong. That, she said, pointing her finger at him, is exactly what someone who has done something wrong would say. She turned slightly, aware of the small audience gathering at the edges of the path, and something in her posture shifted. She stood straighter, chin up, like she was performing now as much as confronting. I have every right to report suspicious activity in my neighborhood. This is my park. I walk here every single morning, and I have never, she let the word land heavy, seen you here before. That's because you don't know me, Marvin said. And I don't want to, she shot back, fast and flat. Then she caught herself, glanced at the growing audience, and softened her expression with visible effort. Look, I'm not trying to make trouble. I'm trying to keep this neighborhood safe. That's all this is. Marvin almost laughed. The sound almost came out of him before he could stop it. Not because anything was funny, but because of how perfectly she believed herself. He could see it in her eyes. She fully, completely believed that she was the reasonable one in this situation. He looked back at the pavilion. He put both hands back flat on his knees. He breathed. 3 benches away, Deacon Beaufort rose slowly from his seat. The old man in the gray jacket folded his newspaper under one arm and began walking toward the scene, unhurried, like a man with all the time in the world. He stopped within earshot and stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching. Then, from the park entrance, the sound of tires on asphalt. 2 patrol cars rolled slowly up the path. Marvin saw them before Daniela did. He watched them through the corner of his eye, white and blue, roof lights off, moving at an easy roll. His whole body went tight. He kept his hands exactly where they were. Calm, he told himself. Whatever happens next, stay calm. The patrol cars stopped. Both doors opened at once. Officer Ray Topher stepped out of the first car. Big, broad-shouldered, dark uniform, silver badge catching the morning sun. He was 44 years old and had the kind of face that had seen enough to stay calm through almost anything. He took in the whole scene in about 3 seconds. Daniela Harfield with her phone up. Marvin on the bench with his hands flat on his knees. The small audience scattered along the path. The old man standing to the side, watching. Topher's partner, Officer Dana Kelly, stepped out of the second car. Younger. Steady eyes. She read the scene just as fast. Daniela moved immediately. Officers? Thank goodness. He's right there. He's been sitting there refusing to cooperate, refusing to identify himself, refusing to... Topher walked past her, not around her, past her, like she hadn't spoken. His eyes were fixed on Marvin, and he moved toward the bench with calm, even steps. Daniela turned, mouth open, watching him go. He reached the bench and stopped. Then Ray Topher sat down. He sat down right beside Marvin Wenstorm on that wooden park bench, leaving a respectful foot of space between them, and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, like 2 people about to have a conversation. Marvin stared at him. He couldn't help it. Of everything he had prepared himself for in the last 10 minutes, everything his mother had ever quietly warned him about, every scenario he had run through in his head the moment he heard those tires, this was not it. "You doing okay, son?" Topher asked. His voice was low. "Just for Marvin." Marvin blinked. "Yes, sir," he said carefully. "You been sitting here long?" "About an hour." Topher nodded slowly. "What are you working on?" A beat of silence. Then Marvin reached down and picked up his sketchbook. He held it open toward Topher without a word. Topher looked at the drawings. Really looked. Not a glance, not a dismissal. He studied the pavilion sketches, the careful lines, the structural detail. His expression shifted into something genuine. "These are good," he said. "You do this a lot?" "Every weekend I can," Marvin said. Kelly had drifted over quietly and was now standing just to the side. She leaned in slightly to see the sketchbook, and something crossed her face. Real surprise, unguarded. "These are really good," she said. "Like, actually impressive." "Excuse me!" Daniela Harfield's voice came from behind them, high and tight with disbelief. "I called you here because this person was loitering and refusing to—" Topher stood. He turned to face her slowly, and something about the steadiness of it, the complete absence of urgency, made her stop mid-sentence. "Ma'am," he said, calm and even, "this young man is sitting on a public bench in a public park. He has committed no crime. He has violated no ordinance." He paused, letting that settle. "There is nothing for us to do here, except make sure he's all right." He glanced back briefly at Marvin as he said it. Daniela's face went red from her throat up. "I pay taxes in this neighborhood. I have lived here for 11 years, and I have never once—" "Your name, ma'am," Topher said. He had a small notepad out now, pen ready. "I'll need it for my report." She stopped. For your report?" "Yes, ma'am. For the record." He looked at her, pen poised, waiting, patient as stone. Something moved through Daniela Harfield's expression that she couldn't quite control. The camera that had been raised and steady in her hand drifted, just slightly, downward. She gave her name. Stiffly. Like it cost her something. Kelly had turned back to Marvin. Quietly, so only he could hear. "You going to school for this? Architecture or something?" Marvin looked at her for a moment. Then, almost without meaning to, he reached into the back of his sketchbook and pulled out the folded letter. He handed it to her without saying anything. She read it. Her eyebrows went up. She looked at him. "Full ride?" "Yes, ma'am." She handed it back, shaking her head slowly with a small, real smile. "You better come back and build something in this city." Topher turned from Daniela and walked back to Marvin. He extended his hand. Marvin stood and took it. A firm, solid handshake. "Congratulations, son," Topher said quietly. "I mean that." Behind them, Daniela Harfield was already on her phone, walking fast toward the park exit. And from the side, moving slowly across the grass with a folded newspaper tucked under one arm, the old man in the gray jacket finally approached. The old man moved like he had somewhere to be, and no particular hurry getting there. He was 71, maybe 72, with close-cropped white hair and dark, steady eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His gray jacket was pressed neat. His shoes were clean. He carried himself the way certain older men do, like someone who had already survived the worst the world had to offer and come out the other side with his spine straight. He stopped in front of Marvin and the two officers and introduced himself. "James Beaufort." He looked at Topher. "Most people call me Deacon." Topher's expression shifted. A flicker of recognition, quick and certain. "I know that name," he said. "I imagine you do." Deacon's eyes moved to Marvin. He studied the boy for a moment. The folded hands, the steady jaw, the sketchbook held against his side. Something in the old man's face was careful, measured, like a doctor who already knows the diagnosis and is choosing his words. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He produced a single folded document. White paper, creased into thirds, official city letterhead visible at the top edge. He held it out to Marvin. Not to Topher, not to Kelly, to Marvin. Marvin took it. He unfolded it slowly. The paper was crisp, recently printed. His eyes moved across the header first. City of Claremont, Office of Municipal Development, Redevelopment Condemnation Order. The date in the top right corner was 3 days ago. His eyes dropped to the address block in the middle of the page. 44117 East Side Corridor, Claremont, Ohio. His address. His home. He read it again. Then a third time. Slower. Because the first 2 times his brain had tried to reject it, like something that couldn't possibly be real. The language was dense and bureaucratic, but the meaning underneath was simple and brutal. The city had initiated eminent domain proceedings against a 6-block stretch of the East Side Corridor. Every building in that stretch was targeted. Residents had 90 days to vacate their properties. The buyout figure was listed in a small box near the bottom of the page. Marvin stared at that number for a long time. It wouldn't cover first and last month's rent on a 1-bedroom apartment anywhere in Claremont. Not even close. "Where did you get this?" His voice came out quieter than he intended. "City Bulletin," Deacon said. "Online posting, 3 days ago. I recognized the block. Recognized your building." He paused. "I've been coming to this park every Saturday for 6 years, son. I know most of the families on that corridor by name." Topher had moved closer. He was reading the document over Marvin's shoulder, and whatever calm professionalism he'd been carrying since he stepped out of that patrol car had gone slightly tight around the edges. Kelly stood still, watching Deacon. "Who filed it?" Topher asked. Deacon looked at him steadily. "The development company that initiated the project is called Harfield Property Partners." The name landed like something dropped on a hard floor. Topher went very still. Kelly turned her head toward the park exit. Toward the direction Daniela Harfield had walked 60 seconds ago. Phone already to her ear, moving fast. Moving like someone making a report of her own. Marvin felt the pieces connect in his chest before his brain had finished arranging them. He looked up from the document. Her husband. Gary Harfield, Deacon confirmed. City Councilman, District 4. He has held that seat for 9 years and sits on the Municipal Development Subcommittee. He said it plainly, without drama, the way you state facts that are terrible enough on their own. Marvin looked back down at the paper. His scholarship letter was still inside his sketchbook, pressed between the pages. The letter he hadn't told anyone about yet, hadn't even said out loud. He thought about his mother. She was at work right now. Double shift, same as every Saturday. She would walk through the front door in 4 hours, smelling like industrial detergent, pull off her shoes at the door, and ask him what he wanted for dinner. She didn't know this paper existed. She didn't know any of this existed. He folded the condemnation notice carefully. Exactly the same 3 creases it had come with. He slid it into his sketchbook, right beside the scholarship letter, his future, and the threat to everything underneath it, pressed together between the same worn covers. He stood there holding it for a moment. Nobody spoke. The park was still beautiful. The sun was still warm. Somewhere across the grass, a child was laughing at something. None of it felt real. The east side looked the same as it always did. That was the strangest part. Marvin walked home through streets he had known his entire life, and everything was exactly where it had always been. Mr. Patterson's rusted pickup in the same spot it had occupied for 3 years. The cracked sidewalk outside the laundromat with the chunk missing from the corner. The one he'd been stepping around since he was 9 years old. Carl and Betty Simmons's diner with its hand-painted sign. Simmons' kitchen, home cooking since 1989. The smell of bacon and coffee drifting out through the screen door even now. Mid-morning. Ruth Orden's porch was a riot of late summer color. Marigolds in clay pots lined every step, orange and yellow tumbling over each other. Ruth herself wasn't outside, but her presence was everywhere. In the swept concrete, the carefully tied tomato plants climbing the rail, the wind chime turning slow and easy above the door. She had lived in that house for 41 years. Marvin kept walking. He let himself into the apartment and sat down at the kitchen table without taking off his backpack. The room was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of a television from the apartment upstairs. He set his sketchbook on the table in front of him and looked at it. Then he waited. Everly Wenstorm came through the door at 12:40. Still in her work uniform, pale blue shirt with the hospital laundry logo above the breast pocket, dark pants, shoes she'd changed out of before she'd even fully closed the door behind her. She was 47 years old and moved like someone who had been on her feet since before sunrise, which she had. She dropped her bag on the chair by the door, rolled her neck once, and looked at her son sitting at the kitchen table with his backpack still on. She stopped. Mothers know things. They know them before they're told. "Marvin." Her voice was careful. "What happened?" He took the backpack off. He opened the sketchbook. He took out both pieces of paper, the scholarship letter and the condemnation notice, and set them side by side on the table in front of her. He told her everything. The park, the drawing, Daniela Harfield, the 911 call, Officer Topher sitting down beside him on the bench, Kelly reading his scholarship letter, and then Deacon Beaufort walking across the grass with that folded document in his jacket pocket like he'd been carrying bad news carefully for days. Everly sat down. She picked up the condemnation notice first. She read it, the way she read everything important, slowly, completely, without expression. Her eyes moved line by line, all the way to the buyout figure at the bottom. She looked at that number for a long time. Then she set it down and picked up the scholarship letter. She read that slowly, too, all the way through. Marvin watched her face and couldn't read it. She set the letter down. She placed both papers precisely side by side on the table, edges aligned. She folded her hands on top of them. Then she looked at her son. "We are not going anywhere." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam her hand on the table or let her eyes fill up. She said it the way you state something that was never actually in question. Flat and certain and absolute, like a law of nature. Like gravity. "We are not going anywhere." Marvin nodded once. He believed her completely. "Call Mr. Beaufort in the morning," she said. "First thing." She pushed back from the table, moved to the stove, and began heating up the rice and chicken from the night before. The gas clicked, the burner caught blue, and Everly Wenstorm started cooking like the ground beneath their lives was not being sold out from under them. They ate together at the same table, the two papers still sitting there between the salt shaker and the napkin holder. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't the heavy kind. It was the kind that meant, we are still here. We are still standing. And we are going to figure this out. That night, long after his mother had gone to bed, Marvin sat at the kitchen table with his sketchbook open. He couldn't sleep. He drew the East Side blocks from memory, Ruth's porch, the diner sign, the row of narrow houses with their small front yards, the cracked sidewalk outside the laundromat. He drew it all exactly as it was. He didn't know yet that drawing it might be the thing that saved it. The next morning, Marvin and Everly sat across from Deacon Beaufort at his small, cluttered desk, the condemnation notice flat between them. Deacon looked at them both. Then he said, "Then we fight it." Deacon's office was small and honest about it. Two metal filing cabinets pushed against the wall, both overfull, drawers that didn't quite close all the way. A desk buried under stacked folders, legal pads and coffee cups at various stages of emptiness. A single window that looked out onto a narrow alley. Law books on shelves that bowed slightly under the weight. The room smelled like old paper and black coffee, and it felt like exactly the kind of place where serious work got done quietly, without fanfare. Deacon settled into his chair and laced his fingers together on the desk. "Eminent domain is legal," he said, not softening it. "The city has the right to acquire private property for public use. That part is real, and it's the law." He looked at Marvin, then Everly. "But the process has rules. Strict ones. And when those rules aren't followed, that's where we fight." He had already identified what he called procedural vulnerabilities in the condemnation filing, irregularities in the timeline, questions about how the public notice had been issued. He believed he had enough to file an emergency injunction, a legal request to pause the whole process while a court reviewed whether it had been done properly. He would file that afternoon. He would do it pro bono, no charge, no fee, nothing owed. "You've done enough," Everly said. "I haven't done anything yet," Deacon said simply. "Let's get to work." Over the following week, Marvin and Deacon went door to door. Every building on the 6-block corridor. Every resident who would answer. They carried a yellow legal pad and wrote down everything: names, dates, documents, stories. What they found, street by street and door by door, was not just a poor neighborhood. It was a neighborhood that had been carefully, deliberately kept that way. The building violations came first. Marvin had noticed them over the years without understanding what he was seeing. Notices taped to doors, red stickers on windows, inspectors showing up unannounced. What he hadn't known was the pattern. On the east side, code violations were written up fast and enforced hard. Minor issues, a loose stair railing, a water heater past its service date, a crack in exterior paint, became official citations with tight deadlines and financial penalties. The same violations in the Claremont Heights neighborhood, 3 miles west, sat on record for years without action. Deacon had pulled the comparison data. He showed Marvin the numbers at the kitchen table one evening, 2 columns side by side on a legal pad. It was not subtle. Then came the property assessments. The east side had been assessed at artificially low values for over a decade, numbers that kept resident property taxes low on the surface, but quietly ensured that no one on the corridor was building any real equity. You cannot borrow against a home that the city decides is worth almost nothing. You cannot sell it for enough to start over somewhere else. You are kept exactly where you are, with exactly what you have. Then, the businesses. Carl Simmons met them at the diner on a Wednesday morning before the breakfast rush and pulled a manila folder from behind the counter like he'd been waiting for someone to ask. Inside were 7 letters, all from the city's business permit office, all within the past 4 years, all denying renewal requests for various cited reasons that changed slightly each time. The diner's exhaust ventilation, the diner's grease trap, the diner's outdoor seating permit. Each denial sent Carl back to square one, back to the application fee, back to the waiting period. Each one cost him money, and time he didn't have. "I just kept reapplying," Carl said, pushing the folder across the table. He was 68, with thick hands and tired eyes, and a voice like warm gravel. "Because what else do you do? This is our place. Betty and I built this from nothing." Betty came out from the kitchen holding a coffee pot. She was the same age as her husband, silver-haired, small, with the kind of quiet dignity that fills a room without announcing itself. She refilled their cups without being asked and went back without a word. But Marvin saw her jaw tighten as she walked away. 30 years. They had fed this neighborhood for 30 years. That evening, Marvin sat across from Deacon in the small office, with all of it spread between them. The violation records, the assessment comparisons, Carl's denial letters, statements from 6 other residents. The whole ugly picture laid flat on the desk. "This was planned," Marvin said. It wasn't a question. Deacon looked at the documents for a moment. Then he looked at Marvin. 5 years at minimum, he said. The call came early. Marvin was still at the kitchen table with his coffee when his phone buzzed at 7:40 on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after he and Deacon had finished canvassing the corridor. He picked it up and saw Deacon's name on the screen. "Come to the office," the old man said. No greeting. "I found something." Deacon was already at his desk when Marvin arrived, reading glasses on, a document open flat in front of him with 3 different sections circled in red pen. He didn't look up immediately. He held up one finger. "Give me a second," and kept reading. Marvin sat down in the chair across the desk and waited. Finally, Deacon pulled his glasses off and set them on top of the paper. He leaned back in his chair and looked at Marvin with an expression that was equal parts fury and grim satisfaction. The look of a man who has just found exactly what he was hoping not to find. "The public notices," he said, "for the condemnation hearings. What about them?" "They were posted in the city's municipal bulletin." He tapped the document in front of him. "Online only. The city's website requires account registration just to access the notifications page. No paper notices, no postings at the community board at the library, no flyers, nothing physical anywhere." He paused. "You know what percentage of residents on that 6-block corridor are over 60 years old?" Marvin shook his head. 63%, Deacon said. "And I spoke to 9 of them this week. 7 have no internet access at all. 3 of those 7 don't own a computer. Ruth Orden has never created an online account for anything in her life." The room was quiet for a moment. "So they posted the notices," Marvin said slowly, "where the people it affected couldn't see them." "Technically," Deacon said, and the word carried all the weight of a man who had spent a career watching the law be used as a weapon. "The city fulfilled its legal obligation. The notice was publicly available, online, to anyone with internet access and a registered city account." He let that sit. But the intent, the deliberate choice, to use that method for this particular neighborhood, that is a constitutional argument. Equal protection, due process. The notice requirement exists to ensure affected residents can respond. If the method is chosen specifically to prevent that response, that's the violation, Marvin said. That is exactly the violation. Deacon was already reaching for his legal pad. "I'm filing the emergency injunction this afternoon. This is the procedural grounds I needed. It's solid, and it's real, and a state appellate judge is going to see it." Marvin felt something loosen slightly in his chest. For the first time in a week, the ground felt fractionally less like it was sliding. Then Deacon's desk phone rang. He picked it up, listened for 30 seconds, said, "Thank you," in a voice that meant anything but, and set it down. He looked at Marvin. "Gary Harfield filed an expedite order this morning," he said, "through the council. He's invoking a public interest acceleration clause. Moves the vacate deadline from 90 days to 60. Marvin stared at him. "Can he do that?" "It's in city code," Deacon said. "Inserted into the municipal charter as an amendment, 18 months ago." He said it with the flat precision of someone reading from a document, and Marvin understood immediately. 18 months ago, Harfield had already been building this. He hadn't reacted to the injunction filing. He had anticipated it. He had written the tool he needed into law before he ever needed to use it. Marvin thought about his mother getting up before sunrise, her work uniform, her shoes by the door. He thought about 60 days, not 90, 60, and what that actually meant for a woman working double shifts at a hospital laundry. He pulled out his phone and called her. She picked up on the second ring, background noise of the facility behind her voice. He told her about the deadline change, quickly and clearly, the way she had always taught him to deliver bad news. Say it straight. Don't dress it up. There was a long pause on her end. 60 days, she repeated. Yes, ma'am. Another pause. He heard her breathe in once, slow and controlled. "Okay," she said. "Okay. You and Mr. Beaufort keep going. Don't stop." She hung up. That evening, Marvin came home to find a small stack of folded cardboard boxes pushed against the hallway wall, the kind you get free from the grocery store. His mother was in the kitchen starting dinner, her back to the door. She hadn't said a word about the boxes. Neither did he. Dana Kelly arrived at the coffee shop first. She was in plain clothes, jeans, a gray pullover, hair down. Without the uniform, she looked younger, softer around the edges, though her eyes had the same steady alertness they always did. She had a folder on the table in front of her, and both hands wrapped around a coffee cup when Ray Topher came through the door and dropped into the seat across from her. He looked at the folder. "How long have you been putting that together?" "Since the park," she said. Topher was quiet for a moment. He picked up the menu, looked at it without reading it, and set it back down. "Show me." Kelly had been careful, and she had been thorough. Body camera timestamps from the morning in the park. The exact minute Daniela Harfield's 911 call was logged, the response time, the incident report filed afterward with Harfield's name and contact information documented. Personal photographs she had taken on her own time over the following week. The condemnation notices taped to building doors on the East Side corridor. The red city stickers on windows. The hand-painted diner sign. Ruth Orden's front porch. A printed copy of the city's online municipal bulletin page with the registration requirement highlighted in yellow marker. A timeline she had assembled herself, handwritten on a yellow legal pad, connecting Gary Harfield's council positions to the Municipal Development Subcommittee decisions over the past 5 years. Topher read through all of it without speaking. He turned each page slowly. When he finished, he squared the papers back together, tapped them even against the table, and set them down. "You know what this is," Kelly said. It wasn't a question. "I know what it is. I want to take it to Natalie Ulcer." Topher looked up. Natalie Ulcer, the investigative reporter at the Claremont Courier. He knew the name. Most people at the department did. She had been circling City Hall for 3 years, filing public records requests, showing up at council meetings, asking questions that powerful people really did not want asked. She kept hitting walls. The department had heard about it because some of those walls had been built with their department's cooperation. A fact that sat badly with Topher in a way he had never quite said out loud. "If you take that in," he said slowly, "and it goes somewhere, there are people in this building who are going to know it came from us." "I know that," Kelly said. "Your career?" "Ray." She said his name quietly, but with enough weight to stop him. "I have a 10-year-old son. He goes to school 3 miles from the East Side corridor." She paused. "What do I tell him about what I did when I had a chance to do something?" Topher looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "I'll go with you," he said. That same evening, they drove separately to the East Side Community Church on Marsh Street, where Deacon Beaufort had organized a neighborhood meeting. They arrived in plain clothes and sat in the back 2 chairs of a room that held 63 people. Folding chairs arranged in uneven rows, fluorescent lighting, a folding table at the front with a water pitcher and a stack of paper cups. Deacon stood at the front and laid everything out: the condemnation order, the engineered violations, the online-only notices, the 60-day deadline. He spoke plainly and without softening anything, because these were adults who deserved the truth and had been kept from it long enough. Marvin stood beside him and walked through the documented pattern. The comparison data on code enforcement, the property assessment numbers, Carl Simmons's denial letters. His voice was steady. Topher watched the boy from the back of the room and felt something that took him a moment to name. It was recognition. He had grown up 4 blocks from this street. He knew exactly what it cost a young man from the East Side to stand in front of a room full of adults and hold himself that still. Ruth Orden stood up from the third row. She was 74 years old in a floral Sunday dress on a Wednesday evening. "I raised 5 children in my house," she said to the room, not loudly. "My husband is buried at New Hope Church, 2 blocks from my front door." She sat back down. That was all she said. It was enough. After the meeting, as people filed out in small, quiet groups, a woman approached the front table from the side of the room. 55, natural hair, a reporter's notebook already in her hand, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She set a business card on the table in front of Deacon without fanfare. "I've been waiting for something solid," Natalie Ulcer said. "I think I'm looking at it." The call came at 8:17 in the morning. Deacon was already at his desk, coat still on, coffee untouched, when the state appellate court clerk reached him. He listened without writing anything down. He had learned decades ago that the news that matters most, good or bad, you carry in your body first, before it reaches paper. He said thank you. He hung up. He sat for a moment with both hands flat on the desk. Then he called Marvin. The emergency injunction had been granted. The condemnation order was paused, all proceedings frozen, pending a mandatory 30-day review period. The appellate court had cited constitutional insufficiency in the public notice process, which meant Deacon's argument had landed exactly where he aimed it. The court agreed that the online-only notice method had failed to adequately inform the affected residents. The whole process had to stop and answer for itself. Marvin heard the words and felt something crack open in his chest, not breaking, but releasing, like a fist that had been clenched for 2 solid weeks finally, slowly, uncurling. "Is it over?" he asked. "It's paused," Deacon said carefully. "That's not the same thing. But it's real, and it's now, and we take it." The news moved through the East Side corridor the way news always moves through tight communities. Fast and personal, hand to hand, door to door. Marvin told his mother, who called Ruth Orden, who was out on her porch within 10 minutes telling anyone who walked past. By noon, Carl and Betty Simmons had pushed the diner's tables together and started cooking. By 2 o'clock, 60 people were seated at mismatched chairs with plates of food in front of them. Collard greens, cornbread, fried chicken, macaroni that Betty had made in the big pot she only brought out for occasions. It wasn't a party exactly. It was quieter than a party, more careful, the way people celebrate when they know the ground beneath them is still uncertain. But the smiles were real. The laughter was real. Ruth Orden sat at the head of the longest table and ate 2 full plates and told anyone who would listen about the garden she was already planning for next spring. Everly Wenstorm went to Deacon's office after the dinner. Marvin watched her go in and close the door. Through the small window he could see his mother's back, still in her good blouse, the one she saved for important occasions, and Deacon sitting across from her. He couldn't hear what was said, but he watched his mother reach across the desk and take the old man's hand in both of hers and hold it. She didn't let go for a long time. That evening, Marvin sat on the front step as the sun went down over the corridor. The air had cooled. Somewhere down the block, someone was playing music low, something old and familiar drifting out of an open window. He had his phone in his hand and the scholarship letter folded in his shirt pocket. He called his Aunt Lorraine in Columbus. She picked up on the 3rd ring, her voice carrying the warm distraction of someone in the middle of cooking dinner. He said her name. He said he had something to tell her. And then he read the scholarship letter out loud, all the way through, for the first time since it arrived. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then his Aunt Lorraine made a sound that wasn't quite a word, something between a sob and a laugh, raw and genuine and completely uncontrolled, and said his name 3 times in a row, like she was making sure he was real. He sat on that step and talked to her for 40 minutes. About school, about architecture, about his mother, about everything. When he finally hung up, the street was dark, and the music from down the block had changed to something slower. For one evening, just one, he let himself believe it might actually be all right. 3 days passed. On the fourth morning, Deacon arrived at his office at 7:30 to find a thick envelope from the City of Claremont's legal department slipped under his door. He picked it up. He kept his coat on. He stood at his desk and read it in full, every page, without sitting down. Gary Harfield had not challenged the injunction. He had filed an entirely new condemnation action. Separate statute, separate mechanism, reclassifying the entire East Side corridor as a public health and safety emergency zone. Attached were building inspection reports Deacon had never seen before, citing severe structural failures and hazardous conditions across every building in the 6-block stretch. The 30-day appellate review was now legally irrelevant. The new action had already superseded it. Deacon set the papers down on his desk. He stood completely still for a moment. Outside his narrow window, the alley was gray and quiet. He picked up his phone and called Marvin. "Come to the office tomorrow morning," he said. His voice was measured, careful, early. Marvin arrived at 7. Deacon was already there, had clearly been there for hours. His coat was still on, the same gray jacket from the park. And the desk that was normally buried under organized chaos had been completely cleared, except for one thing. A thick stack of documents, arranged in a precise sequence, each section separated by a strip of yellow sticky note with handwritten labels. Deacon didn't say good morning. He gestured at the chair. Marvin sat. Deacon walked him through it methodically, the way he did everything, starting at the beginning, building the case piece by piece, not jumping ahead. The new filing was a reclassification of the entire East Side corridor under a separate municipal statute. Not eminent domain this time. A public health and safety emergency designation, different legal mechanism, different procedural pathway. The appellate court's ruling on the original condemnation order had no jurisdiction over this action. It was, technically, a completely separate matter. "He let us win," Marvin said slowly. "He let us win the injunction on purpose." Deacon looked at him. "Say that again." "He knew we'd file the injunction. He probably expected it. So he let the first action fail. Let the court pause it. And while everyone was looking at that, he filed this." Marvin felt the shape of it forming as he spoke. "He used our win to distract us." The old man was quiet for a moment. "You'd have made a fine attorney," he said. He turned to the attached building inspection reports, documents filed with the new emergency designation, citing the specific conditions that allegedly justified the reclassification. Structural failures, hazardous load-bearing conditions, foundation compromise in 4 of the 6 buildings, dangerous electrical systems. The reports were detailed, official, stamped, signed by 2 city inspectors whose names Deacon had already looked up. Then Deacon reached across the desk and picked up Marvin's sketchbook. He held it out. "Open it." Marvin opened it to the early pages, the drawings he had made over the past year, sketching the East Side blocks every weekend the same way he sketched everything else. Not just the shapes, the details. The way an architect sees, not the way a tourist sees. Structural lines, load points, foundation edges, the way weight distributes across a roof line. Each sketch was dated in the bottom right corner, the way Marvin always dated his work. The earliest ones went back 11 months. Deacon set one of the inspection reports flat on the desk beside the open sketchbook. He pointed. The report cited a compromised load-bearing wall on the east face of the building at 4421 East Side Corridor. Marvin's neighbor, Ruth Orden's building. Dangerous. Potentially catastrophic. Requiring immediate vacation of the structure. Marvin's sketch of that same wall, dated 7 months ago, drawn from across the street on a Sunday morning, showed clean, straight, vertical lines. No bowing, no visible cracking. Solid brick coursing from foundation to roofline, the kind of wall that goes up in the 1940s and stays up for another 100 years if you let it. His sketch from 3 weeks ago showed the same thing. "They're lying," Marvin said. He heard his own voice come out very flat and very certain. "They falsified the reports," Deacon said. "Your drawings are dated documentation that directly contradicts the city's cited conditions. An 18-year-old boy's sketchbook is the evidence that breaks their case open." Marvin stared at the two images side by side. The official report, with its stamped authority and its manufactured emergency, and his own pencil lines, quiet and precise and completely, provably true. Then Deacon turned to the last section of the documents, a city council appendix, buried at the back of the filing. The replacement plan for the East Side corridor after the emergency designation cleared the buildings. Marvin read it twice. It was not affordable housing. It was not a school. It was not a community center or a clinic or anything that used the word residence in good faith. It was a luxury mixed-use development, high-end condominiums, boutique retail, a small hotel with a rooftop terrace, artist renderings attached, all glass and pale stone, and the kind of clean geometric landscaping that had never once existed on the East Side and was never meant for the people who lived there. The primary investor was listed as a private equity group headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina. The group's local legal counsel, the firm handling Claremont filings, was the same firm employed by the city council's own legal advisor. Gary Harfield had not stumbled into any of this. He had built it, methodically, quietly. 5 years of engineered neglect, manufactured vulnerability, and bureaucratic patience, all pointing toward this moment, toward this document, toward these artist renderings of a rooftop terrace where Ruth Orden's marigolds used to grow. Marvin closed the sketchbook. He set it down on the desk beside the falsified reports and left his hand on top of it. "My drawings prove the inspections are lies," he said. Deacon looked at the notebook, then at Marvin. A long, still moment passed between them. "You don't fight a man like this in his own courthouse," the old man said quietly. "You take it somewhere he can't control." That night, Marvin came home to find his mother in the hallway. She wasn't unpacking anything. She wasn't cooking. She was standing in the narrow hallway off the kitchen with a flattened cardboard box in both hands, creasing it back into shape with slow, deliberate folds. She didn't say anything. She didn't look up. She just kept folding. Marvin didn't sleep. He lay on his back in the dark and stared at the ceiling and listened to his mother move around the apartment. The soft sound of her footsteps, the creak of her bedroom door, the tap running briefly at 2 in the morning. She wasn't sleeping either. Neither of them said anything about it. Some nights you just survive until the sun comes back up. By 6, he was dressed. By 6:30, he was at Deacon's office. Deacon had spent the night working. The desk that had been cleared the morning before was covered again, but differently this time. Not the scattered accumulation of an ongoing investigation. This was organized with the precise intentionality of a man building something meant to hold weight. 4 separate stacks, each one labeled, each one ordered internally, document by document, so that anyone picking it up could follow the trail without a guide. "Sit down," Deacon said. "We're calling Natalie Ulcer." He dialed from his desk phone. She picked up on the second ring, already awake, already working, the sound of a keyboard in the background going quiet as she heard Deacon's voice. He told her they were ready. He told her to pick a place, away from the East Side, away from downtown, somewhere no one who worked for Gary Harfield was likely to be eating lunch. She named a diner 2 miles east of the corridor. Neutral ground, an hour from now. The four of them arrived within minutes of each other. Deacon and Marvin first, then Topher and Kelly in Kelly's personal car, both in plain clothes. Natalie Olser was already in a corner booth, with her back to the wall and a recorder on the table. Reporter's notebook open, reading glasses on. She looked like someone who had been waiting for this meeting for 3 years, which she had. They ordered coffee. Nobody touched it. Kelly went first. She laid her documentation folder on the table and walked through it piece by piece. The body cam timestamps from the morning in the park, the 911 call record with Daniela Harfield's name and contact information, the incident report, then her personal photographs, the condemnation notices on building doors, the Red City stickers, the hand-painted diner sign, the community meeting attendance, then her handwritten timeline connecting Gary Harfield's council positions to the development subcommittee decisions, dated and sourced. Natalie read without interrupting. Her pen moved steadily. Deacon went next. He walked her through the legal trail in sequence, the original condemnation order, the online-only notice posted where the affected residents couldn't access it, the fast-tracked 60-day deadline, the emergency injunction that paused it, and then the new health and safety reclassification that bypassed the injunction entirely using a separate statute. He laid the falsified inspection reports flat on the table. He explained what they cited and why those citations were false. Then Marvin set his sketchbook down. He opened it to the first relevant page, the drawing of Ruth Orden's building, dated 11 months ago, clean and detailed, and showing a load-bearing wall that the city's inspector had recently declared compromised and dangerous. He turned the pages slowly, one dated sketch after another, each one a quiet, precise contradiction of the official record. His handwriting in the corner of each page, the dates, the street addresses, the structural notations, was neat and unhurried, the work of someone who had been drawing these buildings with care and love long before anyone gave him a reason to. Natalie took her glasses off. She looked at the sketchbook for a long moment. An 18-year-old drew these, she said. Yes, ma'am, Marvin said. She looked at him directly. Something moved through her expression. Not pity, nothing close to pity. Recognition, maybe. The look of a woman who had spent years documenting what powerful people do to powerless ones and had just found, in a sketchbook full of pencil drawings, the clearest evidence she had ever seen. I need one more piece, she said. She looked at Deacon. Independent structural verification. A qualified engineer who can look at his drawings and the inspection reports and put his name on a statement saying they don't match. Deacon reached into his jacket pocket and produced a folded piece of paper. A name. A phone number. Howard Barnes, he said. Retired city engineer. He conducted a full structural survey of the East Side corridor in 2019. His notes are consistent with every drawing in that sketchbook. Natalie took the paper. She looked around the table, at Deacon, at Topher, at Kelly, at Marvin. 2 weeks, she said. Give me 2 weeks. She was already on her phone before they reached the door. 2 weeks had never felt so long or moved so fast at the same time. Marvin marked them without meaning to. The way you count days when something is coming, when the ground is still uncertain, and the only thing you can do is keep moving, and trust that the people around you are doing the same. He got up every morning. He helped his mother. He checked in with Deacon. He went to the diner and wiped down tables and ate Betty Simmons's cooking, and tried not to watch the calendar too hard. Deacon worked like a man half his age. Howard Barnes came through on the 3rd day. He was 67, retired, with the careful, deliberate manner of someone who had spent 40 years measuring things and understood that precision mattered. He met Deacon and Marvin at his kitchen table with his own 2019 survey notes spread out in front of him. Original field documentation, handwritten and dated, the kind of records a thorough engineer keeps even after the job is done and the client has moved on. He went through Marvin's sketchbook page by page, comparing each drawing against his own survey notes with quiet, methodical attention. He didn't rush. He asked Marvin 2 questions about his methodology: how close he typically positioned himself when drawing, whether he ever sketched from memory rather than observation. Marvin answered both precisely. When Barnes finished, he sat back and folded his hands on the table. "These drawings are accurate," he said. "Consistent with my 2019 findings on every structure I surveyed on that corridor." He picked up the city's emergency inspection report and read it again, slowly, the way he had read it when Deacon first handed it to him 20 minutes earlier. Then he set it down. "These inspection reports are not. The structural conditions cited here did not exist in 2019, and I see no evidence in these drawings that they developed subsequently." "Will you put that in writing?" Deacon asked. Barnes looked at him steadily. "I'll have a formal written statement to you by tomorrow morning." Deacon delivered everything to Patricia Dunn on a Thursday afternoon. Patricia Dunn was 58, a state attorney general's investigator Deacon had known for 30 years, since she was a young attorney and he was in his prime, both of them working different sides of cases that mattered. She was precise, and she was patient, and she did not make promises she couldn't keep, which was exactly why Deacon trusted her completely. He gave her the full package: Kelly's documentation, the legal trail, Marvin's sketchbook, and Howard Barnes's written statement. He walked her through it in sequence, the same way he had walked Natalie Ulcer through it, letting the evidence speak before the argument. Dunn read everything without speaking. When she finished, she looked up at Deacon. "How long have you had this?" "Long enough," he said. "I needed it airtight before I brought it to you." She looked back down at Marvin's sketchbook, open to the drawing of Ruth Orden's building. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm opening a formal state criminal inquiry. Today." She paused. "I'll need 48 hours to prepare the subpoenas." Meanwhile, Natalie Ulcer worked. Marvin didn't see her during those 2 weeks, but he felt the investigation moving the way you feel weather coming. A change in pressure, a shift in the air. He knew she was pulling financial records. He knew because Deacon told him, carefully and in general terms, that she had confirmed through those records that 3 members of the city zoning board had received consulting payments from a shell company connected to the Charlotte Private Equity Group. The corruption didn't stop at Gary Harfield. It spread outward from him like water finding every crack. On weekends, Marvin helped at the diner. He swept the floor after closing and stacked chairs and listened to Carl Simmons talk about the early years, how he and Betty had opened with 6 tables and a borrowed griddle, how the neighborhood had shown up for them the same way they were showing up for it now. Carl talked with his hands and laughed easily, and never once mentioned that everything he had built might still be taken from him. But sometimes he went quiet mid-sentence and looked out the window at the street. And in those moments Marvin didn't say anything either. Some things didn't need words. On a Thursday evening, 11 days after the meeting at the diner, Deacon called. "Monday morning," he said. His voice was level and certain, the voice of a man who has lined everything up and checked it twice, and is ready. "It happens Monday morning." Marvin hung up and sat at the kitchen table for a long time in the quiet. In the hallway, his mother's cardboard boxes were still stacked in the corner. Not for much longer. Monday morning came in gray and cool. Marvin was up before his alarm. He showered, dressed, and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee he barely touched. His mother came out at 6:30, already in her work uniform, and looked at him the way she sometimes did, like she was taking inventory, making sure all of him was still there. "Today?" she said. "Today," he said. She poured her own coffee. She sat across from him. They didn't talk much, just two people sitting together in the early quiet, the way they had done through every hard thing that had ever come to their door. When she left for her shift at 7:15, she put her hand on his shoulder briefly as she passed. He reached up and covered it with his own. Then she was gone, and the apartment was still, and Marvin sat alone and waited for the morning to move. The Claremont City Council chamber was a wide, low-ceilinged room with wood paneling that had been modern once, 40 years ago, and fluorescent lighting that was unkind to everyone it touched. Rows of public gallery seats faced a raised curved dais, where the council members sat behind nameplates and water glasses, and the comfortable expressions of people who had been unchallenged for a very long time. Gary Harfield sat second from the left. He's broad across the shoulders, with hair cut short, and the easy posture of a man who had occupied rooms like this for so long that authority felt like a physical property of his body. He wore a dark suit and a tie the color of old money. He had his prepared remarks in a neat folder in front of him, and when the session came to order, he opened it without hurry. The public gallery held roughly 40 people. Residents, a few local business owners, 2 reporters with notebooks open from the Courier and the local television affiliate. Standard Monday morning attendance for a council session. Unremarkable. Agenda item 4, the council chair announced. Councilman Harfield, you have the floor. Harfield stood. He adjusted his tie. He began. Thank you, Chair. What we're discussing this morning is the responsible use of municipal resources in service of Claremont's long-term growth. The East Side Corridor Revitalization Project represents an investment in this city's future, a transformation of underutilized space into a thriving, economically productive district that will generate tax revenue, create jobs, and… The chamber doors opened at the back. Not loudly, not dramatically. They opened the way doors open when someone with authority and purpose pushes through them. Steadily, without hesitation. Patricia Dunn walked up the center aisle. She was in a dark blazer, State Attorney General's identification already visible on a lanyard at her chest. 2 investigators flanked her, 1 on each side, moving at the same even pace. Harfield kept talking. He made it another sentence, something about community investment, before the room's attention shifted enough that he felt it. He looked up from his prepared remarks. He saw Dunn reach the front of the gallery. He saw the investigators. He saw the document in Dunn's hand. He stopped mid-word. The chamber went absolutely silent. Dunn stepped forward and placed the subpoena on the dais directly in front of Gary Harfield. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Mr. Harfield, this is a formal criminal investigation subpoena issued by the Office of the State Attorney General. You are hereby notified of a criminal inquiry into charges including fraudulent municipal filings, misuse of public authority, and conspiracy to deprive citizens of lawful property rights. She paused. You'll want to contact your attorney. The room stayed silent for 3 full seconds. Then it erupted. Gallery voices, council members leaning toward each other, the television reporter already on his feet. Harfield stood at the podium with his hands on the surface in front of him, the prepared remarks in their neat folder 6 inches from his fingers. His face had gone through several things quickly, and had arrived somewhere small and controlled and utterly exposed. The face of a man who had spent 5 years building something and was watching it come apart in a Monday morning council chamber in front of 40 witnesses. He reached for his water glass. His hand was not steady. On either side of him, his council colleagues did something slow and visible and telling. They moved their chairs, almost imperceptibly, just a few inches to the left or right, away from him. The way people move away from something they have suddenly decided they were never close to. At the back of the gallery, one of the East Side residents who had attended the morning session out of habit and hope pulled out his phone. He dialed Ruth Orden. She picked up on the first ring. "Turn on the news," he said. His voice was shaking with something that wasn't quite sadness and wasn't quite joy, and was exactly what justice feels like when you finally see it arrive. "Turn it on right now." The 24 hours after the council chamber moved fast and hard. By Tuesday morning, 3 members of the city zoning board had submitted their resignations. They didn't announce them publicly or explain them in detail. The letters were brief and bureaucratic, and said nothing about why, which was itself a kind of confession. The county circuit judge with documented ties to Harfield's legal network filed a formal recusal from all related municipal matters before noon. His clerk cited a conflict of interest. Nobody in the courthouse seemed surprised. Marvin heard about each development from Deacon, who called with updates the way a doctor calls with test results. Factual, precise, no drama, letting the information carry its own weight. "It's moving," Deacon said on the second call. "When something like this starts moving, you step back and let it go." The state issued a formal freeze on all Harfield Property Partners municipal filings by Wednesday morning. Every permit application, every development proposal, every outstanding request sitting in any city office, suspended pending the criminal investigation. The luxury development project was halted completely. The artist renderings of rooftop terraces and boutique retail, the ones Marvin had stared at in Deacon's office with his sketchbook in his hands, went nowhere. They stayed exactly where they were, on paper, unrealized, which was exactly where they belonged. Wednesday afternoon, the document Marvin had been waiting for arrived at Deacon's office by courier. Deacon called him. His voice, for the first time in weeks, carried something lighter underneath it. "Come over," he said. "Bring your mother." Deacon read the formal rescission order aloud on Ruth Orden's front porch. He had driven to her house first. She deserved to hear it there, on the porch where her marigolds were still blooming orange and yellow in the late August sun, on the steps she had swept every morning for 41 years. Ruth sat in her chair with both hands wrapped around the porch railing, and Deacon stood on the top step with the document open and read every word of it clearly and without rushing. The condemnation order, both the original eminent domain filing and the emergency health and safety reclassification, was formally and permanently rescinded by the state. All proceedings terminated. No further action authorized. When he finished, Ruth Orden sat very still for a moment. Then she pressed both hands flat against her face and breathed into them, long and deep, the sound of 41 years of home being allowed to stay. Marvin stood at the bottom of the steps and looked at the marigolds. Carl Simmons heard within the hour. He called Betty out from the kitchen and told her, standing in the middle of the diner floor, and Betty Simmons, who had never once cried in front of a customer in 30 years of business, sat down in the nearest chair and did exactly that. Carl put his hand on her shoulder. After a moment, she stood up, wiped her face with her apron, and went back to the kitchen. 20 minutes later, the diner was open, and coffee was free. They served until the kitchen ran out of everything, which took until 7 in the evening. Natalie Olser's second article published Thursday morning. The first had run Monday, simultaneous with the council chamber subpoena, timed with the precision of someone who had been planning the sequence carefully. It had named names, laid out the full 5-year engineering of the East Side's vulnerability, and connected every piece of the documented trail from the manufactured code violations to the falsified inspection reports to the Charlotte Private Equity Group. By Tuesday, it had been picked up by 2 national news outlets. The second article was specifically about Daniela Harfield. It documented her signatures on multiple Harfield Property Partners filings, legal documents she had subsequently claimed she knew nothing about. It documented the 911 call. It documented the pattern of her activity in and around Millbrook Park. It was factual and sourced and devastating in the way that facts, when arranged with care and honesty, can be devastating without a single inflammatory word. By Thursday afternoon, Daniela Harfield had been quietly removed from the board of the Claremont Heritage Foundation. By Friday morning, she had resigned from the Neighborhood Beautification Committee she had chaired for 6 years. The phone calls she made to the women she had lunched with for a decade went unreturned. The park where she had called the police on Marvin Wenstorm was renamed by community petition the following week, Millbrook Community Commons. The city approved it without objection. That Thursday evening, Everly Wenstorm came home from her shift, changed her shoes at the door, and walked to the hallway off the kitchen. She looked at the cardboard boxes stacked in the corner, 4 of them, folded and waiting, the way they had been for weeks. She picked them up one at a time and carried them outside to the recycling bin. She went back inside. She washed her hands. She put the kettle on and made herself a cup of coffee and stood at the kitchen window while it cooled, looking out at the street. Still there. All of it. Still exactly there. The last Sunday of August arrived quietly. Marvin was up early, not from worry this time, but from something else. Something lighter and harder to name. He lay in bed for a few minutes, listening to the sounds of the corridor coming through the window. A car starting. Someone's screen door. The distant clatter of Carl Simmons opening the diner 2 blocks over. The same sounds that had been the background of his entire life. He got up. He put on his blue hoodie, 2 sizes too big still. He picked up his sketchbook. The diner was warm and smelled like butter and coffee and 30 years of Sunday mornings. Carl was behind the counter doing what he always did, moving without wasted motion, cracking eggs with one hand, calling back to Betty without looking up, keeping track of 4 things at once the way people do when a skill has lived in their body long enough to stop being a skill and just become who they are. Marvin sat at the counter and ate scrambled eggs and toast and drank 2 cups of coffee and let the morning be exactly what it was. Easy, ordinary, still there. Betty came out from the kitchen at one point and set a piece of cornbread in front of him without being asked. She patted his hand once, firm and brief, and went back. He ate the cornbread. When he got up to leave, Carl looked at him from behind the counter with those tired, warm eyes. "Come back at Christmas," he said. "I'll make the good stuff." "Yes, sir," Marvin said. He walked the corridor slowly after that. All 6 blocks, one end to the other, in the late morning light. Past Mr. Patterson's rusted pickup. Past the laundromat with its missing sidewalk chunk. Past the buildings he had drawn from every angle over the past year. Their facades familiar to him now, the way a face is familiar. Every crack and ledge and window frame memorized without trying. Ruth Orden was on her porch. She was always on her porch on Sunday mornings. She had a cup of tea and a devotional book open in her lap, and her marigolds rioting in every pot and planter around her. Orange and yellow in the warm light, alive and present, and going absolutely nowhere. She looked up when Marvin stopped at the bottom of her steps. "Leaving tomorrow," he said. She studied him for a moment. "You ready?" He thought about it honestly. "I think so." She nodded slowly. "Good," she said. "You go do what you came here to do, and then you come back and do what you were made to do." She looked at him over the rims of her glasses with an expression that was not a question. "You understand me?" "Yes, ma'am," he said. She went back to her devotional. He kept walking. He sat on a bench near the far end of the corridor in the early afternoon, sketchbook open across his knees, and drew. Not one building this time. All of them, the whole 6-block stretch, condensed into a single wide view, the way you'd draw it if you were standing high above it, and could see everything at once. He drew what was there, Every roofline, every porch, every hand-painted sign and clay pot and cracked sidewalk, exactly as it stood. And then, carefully, on top of what was there, he began to draw what could be. Not luxury condominiums, not a boutique hotel, not rooftop terraces for people who had never walked these blocks. The neighborhood itself, preserved and expanded. A community center where the vacant lot had been sitting for 6 years. A proper park with benches and trees at the corridor's north end, connecting to the walking path. The row houses renovated. Same bones, same faces, but repaired, maintained, worthy of the people who had always lived in them and never stopped caring for them regardless. New storefronts for small businesses, space for the diner to expand its outdoor seating. He drew it all in the same careful pencil lines he used for everything. Precise, deliberate, loving, in the way that attention paid to something is always a form of love. At the bottom of the page, in clean block letters, he wrote, Phase 1, Monday morning, 6:50 a.m. Everly Wenstorm stood on the front step in her good cardigan, not her work uniform, her good cardigan, and watched her son come out of the building with his bags. He had two, a duffel and his backpack, the sketchbook inside it. He was wearing the blue hoodie. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked at her. She had promised herself she would be matter-of-fact about this. Practical. She was a practical woman. She had always been a practical woman. "You have the scholarship letter," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Your health insurance card." "In my wallet." "Call me when you get there." "I will." She nodded once, decisively. Like that settled everything. He picked up his bags. He walked to the end of the block and turned toward the bus stop, and when he reached the corner he turned back once and raised his hand. She raised hers. He turned the corner and was gone. Everly Wenstorm stood on the front step for a moment longer. The corridor was quiet and bright around her. Ruth's marigolds visible from here, the diner sign down the block, the street that had almost been taken and wasn't, the neighborhood that had refused to disappear. Then she let go. One long, slow exhale. Every fear she had carried since the day he was born, since the first time she had sat him down and told him to keep his hands where people could see them, since every morning she had watched him walk out into a world that hadn't decided yet whether to let him be great. All of it, released at once, into the warm morning air. She straightened up. She went back inside. She had a neighborhood to help rebuild. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.